Your business is your biggest asset for 99% of people. It's your biggest financial asset, probably the biggest you'll ever own outside your house. And so then you need to think about, how do I retain that value? How do I protect that value? And also then if you are thinking of selling, what do I need to do to get that value or more out of my business?
Welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast with me, Louisa Meehan. We're exploring real stories from the trenches of people management. Each episode explores the situations business leaders have actually faced, the wins that surprised them, the failures that taught them, the funny moments that kept them sane, and the challenging times that tested their resolve. We dig into what worked, what spectacularly didn't work, and the lessons learned along the way. This is about the messy, unpredictable, rewarding reality of managing humans, not the sanitized version you read about in business books. Damian Connolly is a fractional CFO and SME exit advisor, helping business owners being profitable, resilient, and exit-ready businesses. As an ACCA qualified accountant, Damian's career includes offshore tax advisory, senior management roles in recruitment and property services, and leading financial opportunities for multi-million-pound businesses across the UK, Europe, and Asia. He managed major due diligence and exit processes, including an £80 million business sale. Now, through his business, Sakura, he works with entrepreneurs and SMEs in the UK and Ireland, supporting them as a fractional finance director or CFO and guiding them through early exit planning to maximize business value. So Damian, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. I know we've had a quick chat there around the topic around succession planning and figuring, as I call it, how are you going to exit stage left out of your business? If you've grown a business or you've been the CEO, you're managing a business, what does that look like? I know you work with a lot of business owners in terms of the financial aspects of succession planning, but that brings with it a wider context. So if you were talking to a business owner around their successor and what that might be, if they're planning on exiting within the next 5-year timeframe, what kind of steps do they need to do in relation to ensuring a successful transition?
Great question to start with. Maybe if I couch my experience in a little bit more detail as well. So I've worked in businesses a couple of times which have exited. So I've been working in the finance team as part of a project team, helping a business prepare for and ultimately exit the business. And I've also done it in a private equity backed environment as well. Whereas now that I'm working with my own accountancy practice, I'm working with slightly smaller clients and providing not just financial guidance and support, but trying to take them through the process in a slightly wider view as well.
Yeah.
So to start with, I'd say don't leave it too late. I've worked in an environment where we left it to 9 months before they wanted the exit. And I can tell you it's a very, very stressful process for everyone. And in some cases, it can actually break people, not necessarily the business owner, but probably some of their finance team or related staff. Now, when I'm talking to business owners, I say, look, if you're thinking about it, if it's come onto your radar at all, and it's going to be within 3, 4, 5 years, you need to start thinking seriously and intentionally about it now, and certainly don't leave it later than 18 months, 2 years, because there's just so much work to do.
Yeah.
And you've also got to remember that when you get towards the back end and the exit process, what you're going to be doing is 2 jobs. You're going to be running your business, and you're also going to be dealing with the sale element and all that involves, the due diligence, the negotiations, the dealing with buyers. So again, the more that you can do around the planning element of it, then it'll just take away some of that simple element of the stress. And therefore you'll be doing maybe not 2 jobs, but a job and a half or a job and a quarter, which will make the difference when you get to the back end. So planning early is really, really, really key, from my point of view.
You mentioned there about, certainly 9 months seems slightly crazy, but congratulations.
Crazier.
Yes, congratulations if you succeeded. You mentioned there about selling your business, and when we think about exiting, we can sell it. There might be somebody who'll come in and buy it sort of as an entire entity. Sometimes it's transition from one generation to the next. Some clients that I would work with, their sort of sale plan is that they're going to bring in a CEO and that they step into sort of the primary shareholder role. So they step out of the operational part of it, but essentially somebody else is running the business and they're not involved in that.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you've dealt with sort of all of those kinds of scenarios and maybe some others. How does the strategy change in relation to those, or is it the same irrespective of how you're planning to exit?
It's broadly the same. I think the last one you mentioned where you step out and just act as a chairman or a shareholder isn't really an exit. You're still own the business. You still have that asset that's in your name. But actually all of the other ones, broadly the planning is the same. It's about getting the business owner out of the business, and either that business owner then has the choice to just act as the shareholder and attend board meetings, etc. Or if you're selling to the next generation, if you're selling to a third party, or you're selling to private equity, or even if you're trying to sell to your management team, it's broadly the same process. You've got to step out of the business. You've got to let your management team, whether they're in place, whether you're bringing them in, to start taking on the running of the business. And you've got to then let some of the relationships go as well. And you've got to maybe not be quite so micromanaging as you would be because it's your business. So broadly speaking, that's the first step. And that's the step that probably you'll spend the first 6 or 12 months doing, is starting to identify where you need to step out of the business and then how you're going to do that, and then starting the process of delivering on that. And then when you get a bit further down the road, you might say, well, actually, I'd like to sell it on to my family members who already work at the business. Or you might say, look, I think I've got a really good management team here who seem to be keen to take on the business. Or I want to go externally and sell to the highest bidder, or to the right buyer who has, a similar culture or similar approach to how I run my business. They are the options once you start that process. But in my view, anyway, it starts with getting plan right, and it's about getting the business owner out of the business. And there's a real value to that as well.
Yeah, well, for sure, because whilst we may become our business and see it sort of as a child, so to speak, I know you talk about that, sometimes it's not. And we do need to, you mentioned there a lot about the importance of letting go. You're dealing with people in this situation all the time. From your perspective, what is one of the key catalysts to go from being focused on, I want to grow my business, develop it, to I want to grow and develop my business, but I need to exit and I need to plan that? There's a shift that takes place in the mindset of the individual before they come to them like you in the first place. So typically, for the business owners out there, what are they looking for in themselves to know that they're at that junction?
Well, I've got to be honest, there's very few business owners make that decision without a couple of trigger points. So generally, for most business owners, it's their one and only business. It's the thing they'll only do once in their lifetime, and they'll probably never do it again. So therefore, what they're focused on is running the business, growing the business. Now, if you've exited business before, that's maybe where your mindset is different, because you've gone through the process, you've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. Maybe you've learned a few things along the way. So it tends to be business owners who've done it once before will start the new business with this firmly at the front of their mind, and they'll build the business around being able to exit it. But if you're not exited already, it's actually very unlikely that you'll be planning anything before you need to plan. And usually you need to plan is when something happens that makes you think about, oh, maybe I should sell my business, or can I sell my business, or what if I sold my business? And so that tends to fall into pretty straightforward issues. Either they're just getting old and they start thinking, I just can't keep doing this. I'm now 60 or 65 or 67, or illness. So either maybe it's not someone in their family, maybe it's someone in their contact group, someone in their sort of wider family has gotten ill, and they suddenly go, hang on a second, I think I need to really reduce my hours. I need to get more out of this. I need to enjoy my life. I need to spend more family time. Or it can be something as simple as a very helpful spouse says, when are you going to turn up for the weekend? When are we going to go? When are we going to travel a little bit more? And eventually maybe they say, you need to stop now. It's time. So it tends to be one of those triggers. Or it could be, the environment we're in at the moment where AI is going to eat everyone's breakfast. and you may just decide, you know what, I'm not sure I'm really up for this AI malarkey. I think it might impact my business. And frankly, I just don't have the energy or the desire anymore for it. So they tend to be the triggers for most business owners to then go, can I sell my business? Where do I start? Who do I speak to? What do I need to do? It tends to be second time business owners will be properly planned from day one, which is what all the experts say and what I would ideally like to work with, because then you know what you're working when you got the framework. But that's not the reality in my experience.
I have actually come across both of those two types of people. And I've one person that's jumping to mind who is in the first bucket where he hasn't sold his business, built this amazing business. And whenever I'm speaking with him, he's like, yeah, build it to sell, because he's learned the lesson where he's now stuck where he knows he wants to sell it, but he can't sell it probably for at least 10 years. And it's this kind of, position of, why did I do this to myself? If I'd built it to sell from the beginning, I'd be in a better position, or I'd have more choice, I suppose, an easier choice.
Yeah, exactly. But again, you have to get the business to a certain size for it even to be an issue worth considering. But then by then you've probably been so in the grasp of it that you might not necessarily be looking up and thinking about, well, where am I trying to go to? What are the next options? So it's usually those triggers then that then put it onto someone's radar, and then they maybe start to question and say, who do I need to speak to, and how do I need to start?
And before I get into the specifics on the sort of the people side of it, you said there grow it to a particular size. Can you put a number on that?
I mean, everyone mightn't agree with my number, but I tend to sort of look at a figure of, £1 million turnover tends to be the size of business where it's beginning to get reasonably sizable, likely reasonably profitable. And then from there, you can probably get to 2 million a bit quicker than you did to 1 million. And it's at that stage, maybe the business owners start to feel a little bit maybe overwhelmed. There's a bit more complexity in the business. Maybe now it's time to put some systems and processes in. So that tends to be a good time to have the discussion with them about where you're going next and what you plan to do, and have you thought about the future. But I think below that, you're still probably sort of hand to mouth a little bit. It's probably not big enough that anyone would be willing to spend any money on it. Yeah, that tends to be my threshold, I guess, for no other reason than that's my personal threshold. So other people might have different views. That tends to be where I'd start to have those discussions, or if someone came to me, I'd say, well, okay, you're probably in the right space. Now probably isn't the time, but you've got enough happening within the business and enough within the business to think about maybe getting to 2 million or 3 million. We can probably do it relatively quickly. Now it's on your radar.
And it's a nice even number to think of as well.
Yeah, I think it's easy for people to have in their mind. I mean, the other point to bear in mind as well, which you haven't touched on yet, is that, your business is your biggest asset for 99% of people. It's your biggest financial asset, probably the biggest you'll ever own outside your house. And so then you need to think about, how do I retain that value? How do I protect that value? And also then, if you are thinking of selling, what do I need to do to get that value or more out of my business?
Yeah.
And part of the planning process as well, certainly that I do, is as you go along those 2 years, 18 months, 3 years ideally, you're also looking at, how do I manage my risk? Because if that business goes down as your biggest asset, then you've lost your business asset. Where there's maybe a process to start taking some of the value out of the business along the way to bulk up your own wealth, while you're also then building out the increased value of the business. So if I give you a couple of examples, it's not unusual for business owners to have quite a lot of cash in their business. And it's a psychological thing rather than necessarily a practical thing. But if something goes wrong with the business, or they suddenly end up in a tangle with a business partner or with a customer, all that cash is at risk. So certainly as you're starting to build a business, what you want to do then is also start taking some of that cash out in a tax efficient way, which is why you want to plan. And then it means you get some of that into pay down some of your mortgage, buy a second property, invest in something, while then really focus on, well, how do I replace the value of the business? Because the value of the business is in the cash. The value of the business is in the goodwill, the customers, the team, the pipeline you have. Whereas some businesses, you need to shake them out of I've got cash in the bank, therefore my business is valuable, or that's the best place to have it. The best place to have it is in your own bank account, your own investments. It's about trying to manage that. So you've got enough to manage your cash flow needs, but to start to move some of that and build up your own personal wealth, get it out of the business while also making the business a bit more valuable in other ways.
No, I think that, look, that's certainly a lesson. I think any business owner, myself included, we all need to learn that, because there's no point in doing this if you're not benefiting personally, whatever that looks like for you on the other side of that.
Correct.
Within that, though, you talked a little bit about the importance of building your management team. And obviously I'm here about the human side of sort of business. But when we're planning an exit, planning what that management structure looks like is part of that process. And I'm sure that you deal with that, because if I have been the fountain of all knowledge here to now, or the person that answers all the big complicated questions, then I have to replace myself, whether it's to the person that's buying it or to somebody who can do that work for someone to buy it. So how have you seen businesses go about that process of a successor for the business owner or for the leader within the business?
Well, the simple answer, I think, is you don't need to do it in one go. You don't need to do it in six months' time, which is why, again, if you do the planning piece, you do it early enough, you've got plenty of time to put the strategy in place, to put the plan in place. And it can take a number of forms. You can have a couple of people in the business who you think you just need to build and develop them, or you have a certain element of the team in place. You need to bring someone on top who will be the go-to person in the future. But again, your plan will help you then start to move that forward, because the biggest challenge probably is, if you've got a finance guy to look after finances, you're not checking the bank account every day. That's valuable. You can tick that off the box. Someone who can do some of the customer service is good as well. But the biggest challenge you'll have will be the customer relationships, because that's where the value is, and that's where most business owners have really built up their businesses, those relationships. So you can't get rid of them in 6 months' time. But what you can start to do is change how you deal with new customers, new clients, and then you can start to slowly over time maybe grade your clients and start to then move them to other members of the team. And then alongside that as well, if you start to plan putting processes in, maybe improving some of your systems, your software, again, you got the right people supported by the right systems and processes that then allows you the time and the ability to start to move those relationships. So there's bound to be a few other things as well, but the relationships with the clients is probably the really key thing that business owners get stuck on.
And I think, certainly from the businesses that I work with, that resonates very strongly, because lots of clients are very, very happy for the team to do the work, but they like to have a relationship with the owner and know that it's the owner, the name is on it, that there's that connection if there's a problem or they have a complex query or a strategic decision about their business, that they can ring up the owner and say, what do you think about X, Y, or Z? So handing that over, I can see how that's a much more delicate task.
It is, but if you do it over time, then it shouldn't be hugely problematic, because you build up your team. So then they're only coming to you maybe for certain types of advice, or they're coming to you for specific problems, or you just deal with certain elements of your client base moving forward. Because ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to get to a point where you can replace yourself with a hire.
Yeah.
So even if you can't replace yourself fully when you come to an exit, someone buys your business, takes over your business, generally what will happen is they'll ask you to stick around for 6 months, 12 months, sometimes up to three years. And what you're trying to do is minimize the amount of time you've got to stick around as an employee.
Yes.
And also the less time you're sticking around, it's more likely you get more of your money up front as well. The longer you're held back probably means that more of your price is actually being held back as well. So shorter period probably means a bigger amount to check up front. But also, as a business owner, you don't want to be working under a new boss for an extended period of time. Yeah. So really what you're trying to do is get to a point where either you're just handing over a few last relationships, or you're able to say, well, okay, this is exactly what I do now, and this is a role. So over the next 12 months, we're going to bring in a CEO or a managing director, which is a specific role that they can take over what I do, because actually I've left it to the point where it is just a role now. And yes, the name is above the door, but actually if you explain to people and they can see the value of what the team are doing and etc., then that then makes it relatively straightforward.
And I think, one of the things that I advise people, I'd love to hear from you if it's good advice or not. But one of the things that I advise business owners in that situation, or even if they've got a senior manager and they want to sort of do succession planning within a team, it's, you don't have to go forever. You can go away, take your 2 weeks holidays, but actually, switch off your phone, actually be away and force them to make decisions in your absence. Obviously, they can get you in a dire, like the building has burned down kind of emergency situation, but that you're not involved, so that you can learn what can they do, what can't they do, what decisions did they make right, where were their gaps, and sort of build up that trust, both from you to them, but more importantly, often I think it's for them within themselves, that they trust themselves, that they are capable. Would you have come across those kinds of stepping out in pieces a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I was suggesting earlier, is that I don't think there's any other way of doing it unless you leave it to the last minute, where it's one big move very, very quickly. But my planning process and what I've experienced, that you do it over time, because the one thing that will make an unsuccessful sale process is the owner. If the owner's still too involved, you either won't get the sale away, or you'll end up ending up where I mentioned earlier, you'll end up working for years for that business to try and get your sale. So what you need to do is, over a period of time, really start to strip out everything that you do, as much as the simple stuff as well as the more complex stuff, over time to your team, until either you're not needed, you can go away for 6-7 weeks and nothing happens, because everyone knows what they need to do, how they need to do it, what the processes are, what the clarity about how to deal with problems are, or you just have a very defined role that nothing comes to you unless it ticks within that particular role. And then that means you can be replaced relatively easily. But again, it's not going to become, for different business owners, they adopt a different approach. What I tend to say is, build your management team, support them with the process, the systems, train them. If you need to bring in, invest in training of your team, build them up, train them, and that will give you comfort and also give them comfort that they can start to manage things, because you then give them more responsibility. And so you get to a point then where you have that confidence and they have the confidence. But again, I think it's a gradual thing. You can do it in slightly different ways, but it's unlikely it'll happen in one big bang. It'll be a period of it. And that's the way probably I would recommend you do it as well.
Yeah, I think it gives everybody comfort, as you said. It's a great word in the situation. Within that, at a practical level, one thing that I see businesses doing is creating standard operating procedures. So even businesses that have never had them, because everybody knows what they're doing, if they're preparing for a sale or for an exit in whatever way that's coming along, actually documenting what you're doing so that you can hand it over. Is that something that you would work with businesses on and sort of see them putting in place?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things in the world, is having processes for everything. So whether I'm working with growing businesses or whether I'm working with, hopefully when you're working with an exiting business, they might have some of that in place already. But if they haven't, it's absolutely top of my agenda.
Okay.
So it goes back, your top 3 or 4 things is your management team. It's then about your systems and processes, your SOPs, and then it's your software and systems, because the SOPs work hand in hand with the software. If you've got the right software, you configure it the right way. You configure it so it matches with your systems and with your processes, SOPs, and then your team know exactly what they need to do. And then they've got a suite of videos, they've got a suite of written documents, they've got access to it through your intranet, they've got it on a piece of software where it shares it all with them.
Yeah.
And then once they do it, then you can tweak it, you can change those processes, and then they get familiar with what's allowed, what's not allowed, what they should be doing, what the options are. Or they know they can go and check, do I do this or do this? And then it minimizes over time the amount of support they need from senior people, from the business owner. Again, it won't happen overnight, but once you put them in place and then you use them, then you'll constantly be tweaking them and adjust them. So absolutely top of my list of important things to do is processes it.
Because they're like a living document, aren't they? Like they're never finished.
They should be. Yeah, they should be. Yeah. Anyone who does them and says they're done, we're finished, they're going to have a bit of a problem, because it's never done and finished. There's always something new. There's always a new client issue. There'll be a change in something you do in your sector. There'll be a change in how the finance things happen.
Yeah.
You'll be changing the budget. All these things will make changes. You might find there's changes in how your staff work or think, and you might need to change or add to what you've got already. So absolutely key.
Yeah. And like from a HR perspective, I would say something very similar to that when it comes to job descriptions, which would link in with your SOPs and your management structure, etc. And your policies. It's, yes, of course you get them finished, but they're never finished. You have to come back and refresh them. You have to check in on them because otherwise they become outdated. And my single biggest bugbearer is when somebody turns around and says, I'm not doing that. It's not on my job description, which is similar to, well, I'm not doing that because it's not in the SOP. If it's the right thing to do, then we change the documentation or we go back and question it. And I assume that would be your approach as well.
Yeah. And they're really important as well, because when you get towards the back end of a sale or exit process, you're going to go through the due diligence exercise. And that typically has someone like me acting for the buyer. And my job is to go through and check everything in detail, run the rule over the business, check how it operates, check that the story they've been telling over the last 3 or 5 years actually matches up to what I can see in terms of the financials, in terms of how the business operates, how the software works, checking all their processes, seeing if there's any holes, looking for any risks. So if you've got your contracts in place, they're all updated, they're consistent, they've all been refreshed at the same time. It's clear who does what, who's responsible for various things. You've got a track record going back a number of years. Well, all that then is a tick box when you come to the due diligence, because if you turn up and you say, 2 of the managers don't have an employment contract, the policies for this is 3 years out of date, the policy for that was taken from AI, etc., then this is something that I'd say, okay, it's fine, but it's a bit of a red flag. There's some work to be done there. There may be a few risks in there as well. And it would then form part of my report out of the due diligence saying, we need to take a look at this, or you need to evaluate whether that means the deal doesn't go ahead, or it means you need to have a conversation and say, look, we need to take 100,000 off this because this is the work we need to do, or this is the risk that we've now considered is potentially there for us when we buy our business. So all that's really key to getting you successfully through the due diligence process.
Actually, that reminds me of a client I dealt with a few years ago, Damian, and they were in the process of selling a business that was multi-millions. So it was a decent sized sale. It wasn't heading towards the tens of millions, but it was a multiple of millions. And they had, by the time they were sort of coming down to crunching the numbers and due diligence and that phase, there were between 3 and 5, depending on how you counted, pretty serious HR issues and problems. And so they brought me in and we had to negotiate settlements with these individuals to try. And the reason for it was you may have taken a different tact had they 12 months, 2 years to fix the problems, but they needed to fix these problems prior to the sale going through, because even if the fixing of the problem cost more than it perhaps needed to, they would have taken even more off the sale of the business. So it was actually advantageous to them to fix the problems prior to the sale. And I'm sure you may have come across some of those.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I need to do as part of the planning. So part of the reason of going back 2 years is, that there's tax planning issues, there's moving the business owner out of the business, getting the processes to place, but it's also about picking up the problems and dealing with them beforehand.
Yeah.
Because A, gives you time to deal with them, but B, then it means it doesn't enter into the discussion when you get to the buyer taking a look at your business or going through the due diligence process. And what that means is you might not get the sale away because of these issues at all, in which case it costs you however millions, or they will take, because someone like myself will be advising them saying, this could be as bad as this, or it could be as bad as this.
Yeah.
And you'll always highlight the worst case scenario. So that's what the buyer will take. And then when they sit down with you and they'll say, look, we are going to continue with the deal in a positive case.
Yes.
But then they'll say, look, we view the risk as being 100,000, when in fact, if you just fixed yourself, it might have been 50,000. So it'll be a cost, but you're far better cleaning house beforehand than letting someone else take a view of it and then take probably a more negative view than you. So it's actually very, very common. And it's part of what I've done as part of the work I've done historically, but also with clients. It's about identify if you've got an old minority shareholder where you started off at the start, then you may have gotten on really well, given them 5% of the business, but then 3 years later you're trying to sell. You don't want them scuppering your deal. So what you've got to do then is say, look, I'll buy you out so that you're not involved at the end.
Yeah.
So, and again, if you've got disputes with customers, you've got disputes with a business partner, you've got disputes with any of your employees, it's about identifying them and deal with them as part of your planning so they don't come into the discussion when you're trying to sell. So at least if anyone does identify it, you can say that's been dealt with. There's the agreement that closed that off. That's been dealt with. There's the new contract with the customer. That's been dealt with. And then they can just put it to bed and say, that's fine. That's not our risk to concern ourselves with.
So listen, let's assume we've fixed all the problems. We've agreed an amazing deal and life is good. How do you think, or at what point do you think the founding owner needs to let go? You've used the term letting go a lot through the conversation. So at what point do they actually let go? What does that look like?
And when you say let go, do you mean physically, emotionally?
Probably, I mean, physically, I think they can control easier. Probably more the emotional side of it from their perspective and the controlling side of it from the perspective of whoever it is they're leaving behind.
I think for most business owners, they'll have broadly let go in practice, maybe 6 to 12 months beforehand. Okay. Because they'll have to spend their time on the exit process itself. They may be working a few strategy related issues to maybe get sales up or identify a few new high value clients. But also by then they'll really need to have had their management team in place, train them, have confidence in them. So again, it comes down to they've got a probably much narrow and a more clearer role. So that's the letting go in terms of the practical or the business side of it. Again, you don't need to let go completely before the exit. What you need to be able to do is to be replaced relatively quickly afterwards. So you don't have to necessarily completely let go beforehand, but you need to have the ability to pass everything on completely afterwards, which goes back to that having a job role at that point. But I would say there's actually a big issue emotionally as well, which is something that I didn't realize until more recently, because most of the business I've worked with historically, there's been an earn-out period where they stay with the business for 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, whatever it is. But actually, it's after that earn-out period when they finally leave the business, then actually emotionally it can be quite a problem, because you meet a lot of exited business owners who say, I was really depressed for 12 months after I left the business. Yes, I got all this time to spend in Spain, play golf, but there's a sense of loss of leaving my business. I've been working 18 hours for 18 years. I suddenly don't have to work 18 hours anymore. So they lose identity, they lose that sort of focus, something that's driving them forwards. So, and they've got all this money and all this time, but it isn't quite what they expected it to be. And I've heard that a number of times very recently as I spend more time, looking at the exit process and the sector, and I hear more stories. So what I recommend now to any clients that are moving in that direction is, I say, find somebody who can coach you probably 12 months beforehand, probably 12 months afterwards, I say, so that you're emotionally ready to let go and to be prepared for what happens after you've got your check in the bank and you finish your earn-out, and now you've got the world in front of you in a positive and a negative way. So it means then you can start to maybe identify some hobbies, identify things that maybe you did before you got, completely involved in your business again, and just make sure then that you come out feeling positive rather than where a lot of business owners actually seem to be quite depressed and, they're a bit lonely. But if you plan for that, again, you can probably head off the worst parts of it. Probably not everything, but the worst parts of it. So that's something, It's got nothing to do with accountancy, it's got nothing to do with finance. But actually, as part of that journey, it's something that I now recommend and include in any discussions I have with people sort of heading towards an exit.
Yeah, well, it's the human, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, we are not our bank balance. We are much more than our bank balance. We might like a bank balance, but it's not who we are.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I think I think that is solid advice, whether you're a business owner exiting a business or you're just retiring from a job that you've been committed to at a level where you are given of yourself in any sort of great capacity in terms of your purpose. I think that's very sound advice.
Yeah. And I have an example of a business that I worked in a number of years ago, and we basically got the business, a very successful business. It was turning out about 65 million. The owner was making a lot of money out of it. We got a couple of offers of about 80 million pounds sterling for that business, and for various reasons, the owner decided to turn that money down. He thought he could get more, and then the market changed. There was a financial crash, and the business wasn't the same afterwards. So he left 80 million behind, but he still had plenty cash remaining to him. But he didn't really appreciate what he had. And now, 10 years later, he went and started up a few other businesses. They didn't go particularly well. And unfortunately, he's now dead. So he could have been enjoying a lovely lifestyle, great wealth, but he just didn't appreciate the work that he'd done. He didn't appreciate the opportunity he'd been given. He wants to argue over a few pounds with his ex-wife, and the deal then fell over. And now he's not had the life he could have had through just not taking the opportunity, seeing the positives rather than the negatives. And so what you want to do is get yourself best placed to get the best value you can for your business, prepare yourself emotionally, and then enjoy the next business you set up, or the golf course, or travel, or your family, whatever it is. So that's the human side of it. If it doesn't work out, it can
have a really big impact on it. And I think it's, that you use that term, the sense of purpose. And we do need to be really careful that, of course, our work gives us purpose. We wouldn't be doing what we do, either of us, if it didn't. However, if your work is your only purpose, then you are opening yourself up to a single point of failure. The same as if you only had one client or you only had one product. Same kind of idea. If you only have one single sense of purpose, the same issue, the same risk. It's just with your life, not with your business.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm actually doing some work with another client at the moment who are buyers of businesses, financial services businesses. And I hadn't thought of this option before, but this buyer wants to work with the sellers to give them a retirement run-in. So we're working with a client, we're working with a potential business at the moment he's in his late 60s. He wants to sell the business, obviously, but he actually wants to work 3 or 4 years afterwards, even though he's not going to be boss anymore, but he wants to work in an environment where he's got different responsibilities, where he'll be responsible for continuing to build. There'll be some projects that he'll get involved with alongside the buyer. And so he's quite comfortable with that. And then what he wants to do is maybe work in a part-time capacity or a chairman capacity after that. And as the buyers, we're really keen for him to do that. So that's another option that maybe people haven't thought about. If you find the right buyer, you match to the right buyer, then you can negotiate a slightly different exit than maybe most people take. And this is one that's relatively new to me. The buyer is open enough to say, well, I'll be taking over from day one, but actually I'm happy for you to keep driving the car to a certain extent. And as long as you're getting excitement from it, keep driving the car. So there aren't that many buyers out there that will do that, but it seems like there are some. So again, if you can identify what it is you want to do, plan for it, then the opportunity, another option potentially, is that you find the right buyer that you can work really well with, and that might actually lead you into a slightly different retirement. So over and above your earnout, you'll have another 4 or 5 years to work in the way that you want to work. And that could be another one of those succession plan options as well.
I love that. I think we will end there, because it's about the sharing of your knowledge and your experience, but in a way that's not taxing on you. It's not taking from you. It's you giving back without it costing you something, I suppose, which I really, really like. Do you have any final words, Damian? Any nuggets of advice that I haven't talked to you about that you feel you should share?
Don't think so. I think probably the 2 or 3 things I'd just reiterate is your business is your most valuable asset. So A, you need to protect it, and B, then you need to polish it up and make it more valuable. And over time, then get some of that value into your own personal wealth as well. And plan.
I love it. Fantastic. I hope you are planning a lovely rest of your day, and we will be in touch soon. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me.